In the dead of night, full of echo. Concrete jungle, dreams bust to grow. Mets in the air, chase glory, no fear. Broken backs, but hearts steer clear. OMG, the chaos, what a scene. Streets buzzing like a machine. Grimace from the shadows, chills on my spine. Past haunts, the future shine. Comebacks in the night, keep dreams alive. Fighting tooth and nail just to survive. City's heartbeat echoes in our chant. Grit and glory is all we want. Brooklyn to Queens, hear the roar. From laughter to blood in every scar. Living legends made on this ground. From silence we scream, make a sound. Rising high, falling low, repeat again. Cycles of the game, addicted to the pen. Graffiti tales spray on the wall. Met saga, forever stand tall. Rivals smear.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to Mets Talk Live right here on both of our channels and on X. How are Mets fans feeling on another off day while we kick up our feet and see who we are going to play on Sunday? Either the Dodgers and Padres, and it'll all be decided tonight. And then we really get started on our matchups, the team we're facing, and all that fun stuff, and try to break down everything we possibly can at this moment. Chris, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling fantastic, right? Off days, a couple of off days in between here, and we don't even have to worry about a Mets game. We're kind of sitting here waiting to see who the Mets are going to be matched up with in the NLCS. Game 5 is going to be exciting to watch. Um, it's a blast. I'm having a blast, and I hope everyone in the chat is having a great Friday. It's going to be a great weekend for all New York sports fans. I apologize. I'm not in my current setup right now, so again, apologize for the lighting and everything, but we make things work here. We want to talk Mets baseball with you all, and we definitely appreciate you all being here to start your weekends off. It's going to be a great weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, we're ecstatic, right? We partied, we enjoyed, we celebrated, we watched every video from every angle of the clincher against the Philadelphia Phillies, and now it's down to business. It's 100% down to business, and that's what we're gonna basically put together here, right? We did our own shows. We recapped the Mets Philly series, right? We'll do it very briefly because at this point it really doesn't matter anymore, right? Whatever happened at that point is remarkable, but it's also history, and everything can be for naught. If you lose the NLCS, you kind of like you're gonna feel bad for a couple of weeks, and then you'll start reminiscing about the season and the postseason that the Mets had. But I think it's a good thing that both the Dodgers and the Padres are going Game 5 because they have to use their best starters. They're all using their number one starters, and that benefits the Mets. I know people could talk about momentum and all that fun stuff because the Mets basically had it for like 3 weeks straight, basically. But this team needed a break. You know, after going about almost 3 weeks with basically not more than 1 day off, it gives you a bullpen, a ton of rest. You can set up your rotation the way you want to, right? Everybody that has a couple of bumps and bruises can just rest it up a little bit. And that's key, especially for a team that has been like going 110 miles an hour for 3 weeks, Chris. And I just want to get your thoughts on, how do you feel about these 3 days off before the game on Sunday? And do you think it's a bad thing or a good thing in your own opinion?
First of all, can you hear me a little bit better? Is that better at all? Anybody in the chat, let me know. Because again, I'm not in my usual setup. So if my mic's low, then I got to play around some settings here. But, it is what it is at this point. We know that the Mets have been playing so many different games in a row, so many games in a row. And you just take a look at the actual momentum. Um, a team like the Phillies, they're making those excuses. It's been a talking point with teams in the past of getting first round buys, and they kind of get out of, whack. They get out of whack, and then they go home. And that's the excuse that they use. But, unfortunately, or fortunately for the Mets, right? I think that this is a well timed rested period because they get the best of both worlds now. Like, you've been through postseason action, you're caught up to game speed. Outside of Jeff McNeil, and we'll talk about Jeff McNeil here in just a second, but and then now you get some much needed rest. These off days have allowed the New York Mets to line up their rotation in a manner of however they want, right? Carlos Mendoza and whoever makes these decisions from the top is able to line up this rotation. We'll talk about it because, I'm not sure if we're just going to get right into it. You have it here for or you have the recap here from game 1 of the NLDS, but I would imagine it's the same thing with Kodai Senga opening up in game 1 of the NLCS. To be honest with you, I know there's been some talk about Sean Manaea, and Sean Manaea would be on regular rest if he were to start game 1, but I think that they had a plan, and the plan was for Senga to go in game 5 should there have been one in the NLDS, and I just simply can't see them changing up that formula. And now you get guys in the back end that are well more rested, and you take a look at the guys that these respective teams that the Mets could be matched up with in the NLCS are throwing right their best guys as well. So Dylan went for them. They don't have Joe Musgrove anymore, the Padres, that is, and then the Dodgers are throwing Yamamoto today. So I think that this definitely benefits the Mets. And in terms of the bats, I guess you could say that it might be a little bit of like a momentum stopper, but with the way they just came out and sort of just handed it right to that Philly staff and especially the bullpen, I don't think 3 days off, right, or just about is going to do that much for them. I don't think it's the end of the world at the end of the day. So that I think it's a good thing. Get these guys well rested. I know that you said on your live stream yesterday, Lindor, he gets the extra rest. A guy like Jose Iglesias gets the extra rest. And I think these guys can really benefit from that.
Yeah, and it's not like they were like, right after winning the series against the Phillies, they flew to California somewhere to stay there for 2-3 days, and then stay somewhere in Southern California. You don't have to go too far to go to LA or San Diego, right? For those off days, they're with their families. They're with their wives. They're whatever. They're with the people that they haven't seen basically for a while in their own homes. Remember, even the wives were traveling with them. And some of the families were traveling with them on the road for the last couple of weeks of the season into the playoffs. So it was it's not easy to do that. And, and regardless if you have a lot of money or not, and, you're a celebrity, you're a professional player, it still takes a toll on you. So I think people sleeping in their own beds and just relaxing a little bit and decompressing a little bit because, you saw Nimmo cry, you saw Lindor cry. Like, those are happy tears because of what they went through in their, especially the Mets guys, in their careers, and just to get to this point, right? It was an emotional drain, and I think they needed to decompress a little bit because that is not easy to do what they did, and then actually, play a game in a day. Like, I think that would have been an issue. I think they would have wore themselves out. And this is gonna now again, they can get their ass kicked in the NLCS, and then we can say, oh, maybe it was the layoff. But was anybody talking about the layoff from the Phillies when they won game 2? No, right? Nobody was doing that. The Yankees had a layoff. The Kansas City Royals didn't, even though we can talk about the American League and how trash it is. The fact of the matter is the division teams don't do well after long breaks. And, the Yankees won. There's a possibility that the Dodgers could beat the Padres today, and then what's the conversation about with days off? At the point, you still got to play well. After this first game, I think the cobwebs are out. And again, if you look around the league, around the playoffs, look at the division series in the second game, right? If it was a clean sweep from the wild card teams, then we can talk about whoever who actually didn't have days off you can talk about that. But I think it's a lot for nothing. I just think that you have to wake up and play well, and that's just an excuse teams like to use every single time when they lose. So I'm here for it. I'm okay with it. I think I
No,
truly believe this team needs it, and you could say that now and then be pissed off 6 days from now if we're not doing what we need to do in this series.
yeah, and another point to that too is that the difference here between the Mets, layoff and the Phillies layoff is that the Mets quite literally played in meaningful postseason action. They faced elimination in Game 3 in Milwaukee, right? They faced a high pressure situation of going back and forth in Game 2. They faced a game in Game 4 where they knew they didn't want to go back to Philadelphia. The Phillies, they knew they had the division locked up at a certain point there in September, right? They didn't play that high speed, meaningful baseball for over a week, let
Yeah.
alone 4 days that the Mets are getting off here. So I think that the difference between the Phillies being off for quite that time, for quite so long, and then looking pretty bad on all aspects of the baseball, maybe minus like a Harper, Castellanos, and Wheeler. Everybody else looked pretty garbage for them, not gonna lie. But again, they knew they had the division locked up. They knew that they were in the playoffs at the bare minimum for so long, and they really didn't play high stakes baseball for the better part of a week and a half. So I think it's just too drastic, and I think that's really what the comparison of what I'm seeing is. In talking about this Mets short break here, but I don't think the two situations are the same at all.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, with that quick little recap of the Philly series, that it's over, it's done with. Job, there's a new job to be done, but it's hard to talk about a series when you don't know who you're facing yet, right? That's the obvious point. But you know, I think the whole thing that you can just put the Phillies series as a quick recap and put it in a nutshell, right? The Mets dominated them, like in all aspects, right? The starting pitching was better than the Philadelphia Phillies. It wasn't by much, but it was better. The Mets bullpen, even though it wasn't spectacular, was actually much better if you really look at the numbers. If I'm not mistaken, the Phillies bullpen had over a 6 ERA in the series, and the Mets have just over a 3.5, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was close to a 4. So it wasn't great by any means, but all you have to do is beat your competition, right? That's all you have to do. And then obviously the offense was outstanding for the New York Mets. Look, they averaged about 5.5 runs per game in this series when the Phillies basically just under 3. So you're not going to win that way. And when nothing was really working for you, and the bullpen that was supposed to be better than the Mets coming into this series, which I was always concerned about, as I brought up in the series, in the series preview in one of the shows, I worried about the Phillies bullpen because they've shown that they could pitch extremely well, but none of them pitched well. Every one of those guys gave up some runs in one of the each at least one of these games. And I think that was the key, Chris. I don't know what you thought was the key, but I felt like it came down to the Mets bullpen being just a little bit better.
In my off day live stream that I did yesterday, right before you went live yesterday, I boiled it down to three things that went right for the New York Mets and went wrong for the Philadelphia Phillies. One was clearly the bullpen, like you just said. I think even outside of that game two, where the Phillies did most of their damage off the Mets bullpen, the bullpen held their own. And that has not been a concern for me. The bullpen hasn't really been a concern for me for quite some time. For those of you all who have been, a part of this channel or part of Rob's channel and all of our streams in between have known this. So I was not concerned about the New York Mets bullpen. Clearly, the Phillies, it was bad. It was bad production from them, from Alvarado, Estevez, Strom, Hoffman. I mean, those guys just looked incapable of getting any New York Mets hitter out, really. And the key to our pregame, right, was get Ranger Suarez out of the game, which they were
Mm-hmm.
able to do very early on by making him throw a plethora of pitches very early, and then just do the normal work that you do against their bullpen. And guess what? Hoffman came in. I believe he had a scoreless inning at one point, even though the Mets were threatening. But they got to him. They loaded the bases. They brought in Estevez against Lindor, and the rest is history because we know what Lindor did. The second thing is that the offense, right? I take a look at the production of both offenses, right? You talk about like I had the actual numbers on my live stream yesterday. So if you guys want to check that out, make sure you go check that out. But I gave you all the differences of the total runs in the series, the total extra base hits, right? The Mets had like 4 or 5 more extra base hits, the timely hits, right, for the New York
Yeah.
Mets, and just the ability to string hits together. That's something that the Phillies could not do, right? We know that they're a threat for hitting doubles and home runs, and that's how they get their runs in bunches. I think that myself and you have already stated that, but they can't string hits together. And
Yeah.
I think it's a best of both worlds when you have an offense that is able to do both. And the Mets, in their first, 7 games of these playoffs so far, have shown that they have the ability to win games both with the home run ball and both with just playing small ball, right? And that is something that I like, the versatility of this offense. And number 3, the thing that was separated the Mets apart from the Phillies was the production that they got from their top tier guys, especially at shortstop.
Yep.
Trey Turner's not in the same league as Francisco Lindor, and that's just a fact at this point, right? You look at the production value, both defensively and offensively, that Trey Turner got the Philadelphia Phillies. It's just light years behind what Francisco Lindor was able to provide in this series for the New York Mets. And I'm not saying that Francisco Lindor had this killer series like, that he was knocking the cover off the baseball. He had the timely hits, especially with that grand slam. He went 5 for 18, right? But again, you can expect great defense, right? You can expect the leadership, whether it's on the field or off the field, from Francisco
Yeah.
Lindor. Rob, I'm not sure if you talked about it, but did you see Lindor tap Diaz on the shoulder when they had the mound visit in the 9th inning of Game 4? Did
Yep.
you see that? I mean, Jeremy Hefner was out there talking to Edwin Diaz, and Lindor's just kind of looking around, and he taps Edwin Diaz on the shoulder and says something to him, and there you go. Diaz locks in. Like, there's not really much mimicking that opposing teams can do to try to replicate, everything combined that the Mets get out of Francisco Lindor. So
Yeah.
that's what I kind of boiled it down to, those 3 aspects. But again, you take a look at the Phillies' top guys too. They didn't perform.
Yeah.
Schwarber was quiet, right? Trey Turner was quiet. I know Bryce Harper had some production, but relatively, like, he was also a little bit quiet to his standards. I
Yeah.
think the most dangerous threat for them was Nick Castellanos. That was the most dangerous guy in that lineup.
Yeah.
So, and you take a look at the bottom of their lineup again, just simply not producing. One thing that we have to talk about though, Mr. Vientos, 9 for 16, 2 home runs, 5 RBIs in this series. That is tremendous production from this 24-year-old who's in his first big league season as a consistent everyday player. Tip of the cap to Mark Vientos.
Yeah. I mean, he's been the MVP of the postseason so far, right? Big hits in game, the big home run in Game 2 to tie it. We know what with the Brewers and just outstanding. And it's just shocking. Like, there's always somebody that surprises, especially when the Mets are having the magic type of run that they're having at the moment. There's always that one guy, right? We could talk about Lindor. We could talk about the big home runs from Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo. We can go on and on and on. But Vientos has been our best offensive player in this postseason. And it's not even close, to be quite honest with you. If you look at the numbers, besides the big clutch hits from other guys in the lineup, Vientos has been consistently hitting like getting 2 hits a ball game with a couple of RBIs. It seems like, if not every game, almost, every other game. So he's been outstanding.
420 in these playoffs, Rob.
Yeah.
420.
That's insane. I mean, that is on a Tatis level, what Tatis is doing in the postseason right now. And that's a guy who's been here for how many years now? With the Padres. So it is amazing. And you're right. It ended up being the Mets stars showed up in the biggest moments when they needed them, and the Philly stars didn't. Castellanos was their best offensive player. The Mets could not get him out. But here's the difference. What did he hit? 1 home run in this series, Castellanos, in Game 2, right? That was the only time he went yard. And I think that was key, right? He had a couple of doubles, a couple of singles, but they couldn't get him out. And that's the other thing too. Again, I said it from the series when the series started, is that this is a different animal, the Philadelphia Phillies, compared to the Milwaukee Brewers. The Milwaukee Brewers most of the time will beat you with a ton of singles and, get 4 or 5 hits in an inning, and the occasional home run, which they will hit, but they don't do it enough. Obviously, they did it in game, in the wild card series, in game 3, that almost cost us, this run. But when you keep a team that the way for them to be successful, and their best way to be successful, is hitting the ball over the wall consistently in a series, and they don't do that enough, you're going to have a great chance to win. And, talking about that with the Phillies, but, when we eventually talk about the two teams, one of the teams we might face, look at their offensive production. And we're going to talk about that obviously in the next couple segments, but it's almost very similar. And I'll explain why when we get to that point. But the way the Mets kept them in the ballpark, especially at Citizens Bank, I know it was only 2 games at Citizens and 2 games at Citi Field, but they kept them for the most part in the ballpark, and they limited it to, for the most part, again, to solo home runs. And that was also key. The Phillies live and die on the 2-3-run homers. Like, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was only the Yankees, the Dodgers, and one other team that had more 2-run, 3-run homers in the season. So that just shows you right there that their production, and when they win big because of those home runs. It didn't happen. The Mets pitchers were just a little bit better, especially in the bullpen. And that's basically why we won. But we outplayed them in all aspects of the game. And you want to talk about Philly fans jumping off a bridge? that radio, I tell you, it was beautiful. When I was going to work right after the Mets clinch, I was going to work, and I listened to, I was like, let me put on some sports talk radio in Philadelphia. How are they feeling? There was a couple of Met fans who were trolling. I'm not going to lie. They jumped on Philadelphia radio, and they were like, congratulations for your division championship. It's amazing how the Sixers choked, the Phillies choked. Like, it was a couple of them, but this was supposed to be their team to make it to the World Series, right? That this was supposed to be their best roster from 2022, 2023, and this year. This was their best put together roster. They were having World Series aspirations with this team, and they didn't even get out of the NLDS. Just think of that. And Chris, what did I say? World Series loss, NLCS loss, NLDS loss. Next year, not making the playoffs. That shit gets to your head at some point as a player that has gone through that. Like, what is our problem? Because it's the same people. It's mostly the same core guys. And how much are they really going to change? They're not going to spend a ton of money to add on much anymore, right? They probably aren't going after Juan Soto and others. So this is basically their team. And they've failed 3 years in a row. And they're getting worse and worse year by year. So that's the way I see it with the Phillies. And the Mets just manhandled them.
They only have 3 free agents. I was listening to this segment on MLB Network. They only have 3 free agents, and one of them is Estevez out of the bullpen. I don't even know who the other 2 are. And so I forgot who it was on the segment, was basically saying that since you don't have high turnover, it's not looking like it's going to be a completely new team. You don't really have much you can do in terms of improving your team, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have to make a big league trade, a big leaguer for a big leaguer, whatever that is. Like, trade a Nick Castellanos or something like that. Even though he was their best postseason hitter this year, they have to do something because they're not going to trade Bryce Harper. I don't think anybody's going to take on that Trey Turner contract, even though he did pretty decent in the regular season. He hit 295 for them. He just was a simple no-show in the NLDS. They're going to have a lot to figure out, but guess what? That's their problem, not ours. So
exactly. So, we're moving on. We're doing our thing. We are NLCS bound. And with that now deep run into the playoffs, it turned with one of the stories to, at the end of the year was, can McNeil come back if the Mets make a deep run? Well, there's a pretty good, I guess, rumblings or news-worthy information about Jeff McNeil that there's a pretty good shot he will make this NLCS roster, and that is just another versatile, another guy that can hit you to death. and hit those base hits. And obviously he can shock you with a little bit of power every now and then. McNeil will be a welcome addition, and I do think he will be on the NLCS roster. And no, it's not going to be him over Acuna. I think they're going to get rid of one of the bullpen arms, because let's be honest, they didn't use a couple of guys that just sat in the bullpen for the entire playoffs, basically. So it's probably going to be one of those guys that hasn't pitched off this roster, so you can get another bat that could be damaging in this series to an opposing team. And I think it's going to be a bullpen on Chris. I wonder what your thoughts are. Do you think McNeil is going to make this roster? And it seems like it's going to be very likely that a bullpen arm is going to be off this roster to make room for McNeil.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be Luis Angel Acuna at first. I'm not going to lie, just because it would make sense, a player for a position player. But now you have the reports coming out from a multitude of different reporters, in Mets land over on X. It's like, they're thinking about not going with, one less pitcher. And I think it's not going to be a starter, because you transition to a longer series, a lengthier series. You're going to need to have those starting pitchers, right? Especially having Kodai Senga still being on a presumed pitch count. But Danny Young and Adam Ottavino, I mean, I think that we can confidently say it's going to be one of these two guys. And I think the decision is going to be how much or what the strategy is going to be like for David Peterson. Like, what's the plan for David Peterson in this NLCS? Do you continue to use him as a long man out of the bullpen? Well, if that's the case, maybe they don't have a necessity for a Danny Young. Maybe they want to let him go. But if you're going to know that you want to use him as a starter later in the series, right? Or at least like an opener or something like that, where he's going to be pitching bulk innings at least twice in this series, then you have to think about keeping that lefty in the bullpen and Danny Young, and then transitioning and just getting rid of Adam Ottavino. So for me, if I'm deciding between these two pitchers, my gut tells me that, listen, Adam Ottavino, there's been something. Unless I will say he's not been terrible, but again, they don't trust him in any high leverage situations. So what's the point of even rostering him if he's not going to be entrusted in? If Mendoza doesn't have any trust in him, that's the standpoint that I come from. I know a lot of people who love Adam Ottavino. Don't get me wrong, probably a great guy. Again, wanted to come back to this team for a reason, and we appreciate that. But again, he doesn't have that trust factor in him. He doesn't. And so why would you need that roster spot when you have other guys like a Tyler McGill who can just go out there and be out of the bullpen as well, right? To bolster that bullpen. You have guys like Ryan Stanek now that are available. You have other righties that you can get by with and that have proven they can come through for you in a more efficient and in more of a multitude of a manner than Adam Ottavino. So again, it's going to be between those two guys, but we don't know if that report is like factual or whether they're just quote unquote considering it. Like, we don't know the actual, you know, I guess solid, like not like the validity of that report in terms of how strongly they're actually considering it, right, Rob? But if they are, and if the reports are true and Mendoza is seriously thinking about it, it's going to be one of those two guys. For me, I also look at the flip side of this, in that the MLB has transitioned by default, right, into where teams probably don't value needing a lefty out of the pen as much as they used to with the 3 batter minimum rule, right? And that really is only an advantage if you're facing a team like the Dodgers, right? For example, if the Dodgers are going to be facing the Mets in the NLCS, um, he really that's really where the lefty comes in, having that lefty specialist, right? And of course, Danny Young is no Brooks Raley. We know that, and it's unfortunate that Brooks Raley is not part of this run, because he would be very serviceable for this Mets team right now, a lot more so than Danny Young. But again, when you have like a Max Muncy, a Freddie Freeman, a Shohei Ohtani, right, and those lefties that the Dodgers possess, that might be a situation where you need Danny Young to come in and he's going to have to face the minimum of 3 batters. Do we entrust in him? Probably not. Do the Mets? Does Mendoza? Probably not, because he hasn't pitched since that Milwaukee series, if I'm not mistaken, in the regular season. And Similarly, Adam Ottavino hasn't pitched since that doubleheader in Atlanta where the Mets clinched. He actually pitched in both of those games. So it's a very interesting discussion to have, but more so, I think that even if Jeff McNeil's coming back on this team, I agree. I think the veteran presence is going to be awesome. I think that just having his bat and the fact that you're able to say that you have that bat on your bench is awesome. But I don't think he's going to be, there's no way you can start him, in my humble opinion. There's no way that he can be starting for this team because, I look at the defensive alignment. I look at Tyrone Taylor and the impact that he's had on this
Yeah,
team defensively and offensively. We don't know how game ready Jeff McNeil is. He's taking Arizona Fall League at bats tonight and tomorrow to see how game ready he is.
yeah,
So I think that even if Jeff McNeil makes this roster, right, it's going to be off the bench. And at
yeah.
that point, how much better is he going to be? And how much more trust do you have in a Jeff McNeil rather than the other guy, the other lefty that has been proving to come up huge in these playoffs so far in Jesse Winker? There's a lot of factors here at play. But again, positive news. At least it's good to see that he is on the up and up and potentially coming back. I will say that.
Yeah, I think he would be best suited if he does make this roster on the bench. And, you pick and choose, right? Matchup wise, right? If there's somebody that he, either with the Padres or the Dodgers that he has a good matchup against, I wouldn't be against putting him over, somebody else, even Jesse Winker for that matter, for like a pinch hit appearance, not a starting game, but you never know, right? If, McNeil has crazy numbers against somebody, I know he hasn't played a lot of ball. Maybe you'll do it again. This is a more stretched out series. Obviously, you're only playing 4 games up until this point until somebody wins a game apiece. But it's all indications are it probably might be a long series. I would not be shocked if this series goes 6 or 7. Regardless of who we play. So it's going to be a long series. There's going to be a lot of different matchups, especially with the Dodgers. Like they had an opener the other day when they won like 8-0 against the Padres. So that would be a situation where the Mets might use multiple pinch hitters in a game for matchup purposes when they use 8 pitchers in 8 innings. So if it's a situation like that, if you're playing the Dodgers and they're using an opener again, you're going to have to use your bench because you can't just leave a lefty in there for another lefty. If that guy has terrible numbers against lefty, you want to bring in a right-hander, whatever it might be. So I think it's going to depend on the team you face and the matchup you're facing.
They were even debating using an opener tonight before they made the Yamamoto announcement.
Correct.
And that kind of shows you like what confidence they have in Yamamoto, which
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, I think that they're doing it because he's obviously like one of the highest paid pitchers in the league, right? I
Yeah.
mean, so that you kind of like have to at that point, but it's like, are the
Yeah.
Dodgers even confident in what they got out there? Because we were having a
No.
discussion after a game that they went through in an opener that they won 8-0, whether they're going to go with another opener or start Yamamoto. Obviously, they went Yamamoto, but you know what I'm saying? Like that might be something that the Mets look at and be like, okay, like this is great for us.
Yeah. And look, whoever we play, they're using their best starter, right? Or at least their ace that they make as their ace. Yeah, I don't think it's trust about Yamamoto. I just think that one, obviously, like you said, Chris, they paid him a lot of money to basically be their ace, and look, if I'm not mistaken, they're both going on short rest. If I'm not mistaken, right? Darvish and Yamamoto. I know Yamamoto's going on short rest. I'm not sure about you, Darvish, but in any case, they're using their aces. So you're already going into a series where you're not going to see their ace. And I haven't checked the off days, but you're probably not going to see their best pitcher until either game 3 or 4. So that's already benefiting the Mets. Again, that doesn't actually mean anything, right? You still got to perform. You still got to do your job, but that benefits the Mets. And, and you just hope that, it's a tough ball game all the way through for both teams. But yeah, you're right. You're right about that, though. I don't think the Dodgers trust Yamamoto, to be quite honest with you. It's just that how would the Dodgers look losing and not using the guy you paid all this money to, and he's sitting on the bench, right? I think that was the thing that we talked about. That why wouldn't the Phillies use Zach Wheeler in Game 4? Because there is no tomorrow if you lose Game 4. The Phillies left Zach Wheeler on the bench. And if you look at other teams, they had no problem possibly doing that for either game 4 or game, some of them did keep it for game 5, but they didn't use their best pitcher in game 4 on short rest, right? You can't hold guys just because, you want them for a game 5 or holding them for a game 1 of the next series. They might not be in next series. So, I'm actually, I was like, you know what? Good job by the Dodgers and the Padres, because they could have went a different route and they didn't. Right? I'd rather go down with my best guys than the guy that I probably didn't want on the mound in the first place. That's the way I feel, right?
Which is
Yeah,
why I thought that Wheeler was going to be in there in game 4 for the Phillies, but they didn't do it.
no, and again, I still say it till this at 6:40 on a Friday, October 11th. The Phillies thought they were still going to win that series. Regardless of how bad they played, I felt like the cockiness of them, and I don't even think it was confidence of their team. I just think the cockiness was the Mets will find a way to blow it, and we'll win this series regardless of who we put out there. I truly believe that. They'll never admit it, but the way they acted post-game and the way they sounded, and I know they gave credit to the Mets kinda, but it was kind of like a jab at the Mets saying that, then they're still not better than us. They were just better than us in the series. Just shows you that they had that cockiness to them, that this series was going to be in their favor at some point. And it never happened. So I just, the way I see it is go down with your best guy. And I always feel that way with the Mets, right? I always felt like Quintana is that perfect veteran where he's not going to wow you, but he will give you an opportunity to win a ball game. And that's what you need in elimination games. Do you want a dominant performance? Absolutely. But more importantly, you just need a guy to keep you in a ball game. If you put zeros up and you keep the game within striking distance, there's a pretty good chance you're going to win that ball game, because all you need is that one mistake from the other team that can cost them a series. And that's why I always go with my best guy, or at least the guy that I trust to give me a chance to win that ball game. And good job by the Dodgers and the Padres for putting those guys out there, because you are going down swinging with your best guy. And I'm okay with that. Nobody wants to lose, but I'd be okay with that if that's the case.
So with that statement, as it pertains to the Mets, who do you put out there for game 1 if you want to go down with your best and set the tone? Do you go Senga or do you go Minaya?
See, I don't like that opener nonsense. I really don't. I kind of think that the Mets got, I'm not going to say lucky, but in game 1, I feel like they got away with a little bit in game 1. Like, I think that was the game the Phillies needed to win. And I felt like the Mets were kind of like pushing them to the finish line a little bit doing that. I felt like I didn't like that choice. And I said in the pregame, I wasn't very happy with that, because if Senga wasn't going to just go out there and just pitch his ass off and just let him throw, I felt like we were going to have to use guys. Now, it worked out because, you use long men and everything like that. It kind of worked out. Here's the problem. You're in a longer series now, right? You can't afford for Senga just to go 2 innings and then use Peterson to piggyback off of him, because he might not be available for 2 days, right? It's different when it's a shorter series, because, you kind of have no room for error, and you got to use those guys again. In this situation, you might not use Peterson if he's used in game 1 for, say, 3 innings, piggybacking off of Senga, and he might not see him until game 3 or 4, maybe even game 4. And that's the same thing goes for Tyler McGill. So, and you might have to use one of those guys as a starter in the series. So, and to answer your question, Chris, I think Peterson's going to get left in a bullpen and McGill's going to get a start in this series, in my opinion. And I think that's. Oh, I'm sorry. Again.
No. You go ahead. You go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, because I think that Peterson has been so good in the bullpen. I don't want to lose that guy out of the bullpen, regardless if it's lefty or righty. He's just been damn good. Now that you have another trusted guy in the bullpen, because remember, guys, if you don't trust McGill coming out of the bullpen, and most of you seem like you didn't in this last series, you're going to have to use Jose Butto a little bit more if Peterson's not going to be your guy and he's going into the rotation. The way Jose Butto has performed in his postseason, are you willing to put all that trust in him to those spots will be where Peterson was, because Jose Buto has very good numbers in during the season against left-handed batters. He is your best guy against left-handed batters without having a lefty if Peterson is not your guy. So that's why I think Peterson's going to stay in the bullpen, because you can use him multiple times in this series, and especially game one if you're going to go Kodai Senga. But what is the best thing that could happen if you win a series early and you get a couple of days off? You get to set up your rotation, right? I don't want to play games, right? In my opinion, I throw Kodai Senga game 3 going back home, right? Regardless of if it's 1-1, 2-0 for either team, I'm going Kodai Senga at home. I think it's a little bit more just an easier situation for the most part, right? We could be down 2-0 and, I'd probably be talking about the same thing. Damn, I didn't want to use an opener in this situation, but the Mets did win the Senga opener in game 1. Somehow, some way, they won it. Now, that might not translate to this series, but you got the setup you wanted perfectly. For the first time, basically this postseason, you were able to set up your rotation the way you want to. And that might not lead to a series win, but I'd rather go right away in hostile territory with Minaya and Severino in game 1 or 2. And I would pitch Minaya. I would not use Senga in game 1. I think it was just a very interesting situation that just happened to come up with Senga in game 1. I hope they don't do that this time.
I think they will. I don't see a way that they're gonna just move off of Kodai Senga from game 1. But my question to you at that point is just a little bit of pushback here, because what would a podcast be, right, without some pushback? What you like? Are you in agreement at least that the Mets have to use Kodai Senga in some sort of capacity?
Yeah.
Because if you don't use him at all, I mean, you can either bring him out of the bullpen, which I don't think they're going to do, or you could just not play him and just be like, we got to go with the guys that have been pitching for the last couple of months. And then you'd have to use most likely, definitely David Peterson for a starter, and maybe even a Tyler McGill as a starter. So I'm kind of just like wondering, we know what the situation is with Kodai Senga. I think this time around, he's going to get closer to like 60 pitches, maybe 65 if we're lucky. And that can get us into like the 4th inning, 5th inning if he's really, really good. But that's kind of what we're looking at. So we're kind of expanding away from an actual opener, because he's not just going to go 2 innings in my mind. But I think like, are you just basing it off the home crowd versus being away versus home? Is that what you're assessing? Because like, we have to use him in some sort of capacity. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's why I want to put him in game 3 at home. I think the fans are jumping around, they're going crazy. I think it's a better situation, right? I think we pulled a rabbit out of our hat in game 1. I think the Mets got extremely lucky there that after the Schwarber home run, Senga actually pitched well. I'm not saying that he wouldn't have pitched well, and it worked out for the Mets. But I just think when it comes to a longer series, you're going to be using guys more frequently out of the bullpen, especially if you use Senga. And look, they always talk about high leverage innings, right? I don't think it's about pitches. I think if he has a high leverage first inning, and even if he throws 15 pitches, but it's high leverage, and he walked somebody and he got a double play, but it still was high leverage. There was a little bit of a threat in the first inning. How far will they go with him? Like, the 60 pitches sounds good, but what if it's only 2 or 3 innings, right? And I just feel like you're going to be, especially in the middle of this series, you get to game 3, your first time at home, you get into that middle of the series. I feel like you can't just go out there and, because there's no guarantee that the guy who piggybacks off of Senga, say if it is McGill, is going to pitch well. If he doesn't have it and he's supposed to go 3 innings for you, guess what you're using? You're using a hell of a lot more of your bullpen, and you still got game 4, 5, 6, 7, or in this case, game 1, you still got 2, 3, and at least game 4. And if it goes longer, now you got to stretch it out. I know there's off days in between, but there's not that many, recovery days for guys that we're going to use. So that's why I rather look. What is the key when you're don't have home field advantage in a series? You got to win at least one of these games in the road ballpark. You have to. because in a 7-game series, you do got 3 games in a row after the first 2. You got 3, 4, and 5 at home, and you win game 1, you have a very strong possibility of not going back to the opposing ballpark. And that's that. When this series, I think it's a little bit different than a 5-game series. In my opinion, I think that's why you should just make sure you use your best guys in game 1 and 2. And on top of that, Chris, is that if you push back Senga, if you use Senga for game 1, that means you're pushing obviously Manaea and Severino for game 2 or 3, whatever scenario you want, right? You might lose one of those guys for a game 6 or 7, specifically a game 7.
I was going to look at it the other way around and say that you probably get Senga to go around another time, a third time through, and then he might be already caught up to full speed. So like I'm with you, but like I'm in the camp of let's see Kodai Senga as much as possible to try to set him up for success and an even lengthier start, because I think that, you know, regardless, I think you're going to see Sean Manaea a second time through if it goes 7 games, right? He's going to be your probably game 7 starter. So I agree with you, and that's the same thought process that I'm taking, but from the different lens of I'd rather see Senga more often than not. That's really the difference.
You know, I see people in the chat saying, "Oh, you know, Rob, you know, Senga is going to go more than 2 innings." Again, what if he doesn't pitch well? You're not going to leave him in there, right? You know, we're only thinking about the good aspect of it. But if he has nothing, because we have not seen him pitch again after he already pitched, right? We don't know the recovery time. We don't know how he's going to feel. We don't know how sharp he's going to be. We're only talking about the good side here. But what if he goes out there and lays an egg in 2 innings and doesn't look good and gives up a couple of runs, right? Do you really want him pitching again in this series as an opener in game 6 or 7? Because that's probably where he'll line up to be. At least in game 3, it's near the middle of the series, with Manaea and Severino going game 1 or 2, game 1 and 2, depending on which way you want to go. What has been the success for the New York Mets? They've won game 1 of series, the Brewers and the Phillies. That was key to both of those series, because game 2 wasn't necessarily a swing game, except, you know, obviously in the wild card round because there was only 3 games. But you win game 1, you just put yourself in home field advantage. And that's why I feel more comfortable going with your best guy. And look, if Senga didn't pitch as good as, if Manaea didn't pitch as good as he did at Citi Field, and as good as he was, I wouldn't have said Manaea game 1. But because he was so good, and we found that ace that we saw for the majority of the season, I feel like he's back. And listen, you're going to have the pitching matchup in game 1, regardless of who you're facing, right? I think, you know, I truly believe that, right? Because I don't even think Dylan Cease is available, because he pitched, 2 days ago? So he won't be available either unless they're going to be available.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So they're going to go with their third best starter. I want the best starter and the pitching matchup in game 1, because you have that opportunity to do so. I don't think Mendoza is going to mess around. As much as they might really like Senga and that swing and miss ability, that swing and miss ability also increases his pitch count rather quickly as well. So I truly think this. I think that go with your 2 best pitchers and adjust after that, because take one of those games in either San Diego or LA, you're back in that home field advantage situation, just like they put themselves in against Philadelphia, and they never went back. And that's the goal. You got to take one of these games on the road, and to have only one of Manaea or Severino. You would think it would be Manaea game 2 if Senga pitches game 1. To not have your 2 best starters, because if you lose game 1, now you really got to win game 2. And I know Manaea could do that, and maybe that might be the thinking they have, that I want my best pitcher going game 2, because you might sneak out a game 1. I don't want to sneak a game 1. I want to win game 1, and I want to do it in the fashion that is dominant. I don't want to be playing a game here and say, oh, well, if Senga pitches well, he could throw 60 pitches and go 3 innings. But we're not talking about if he pitches badly. If he pitches badly, you know, you got a whole nother conversation to talk about.
Yeah, I think you can look at it from either lens, to be honest with you. I think you can make the argument with either lens, through either lens, right? What you said about, trying to take game one and not going up against their best, or trying to take game one by throwing a guy that's going to be only available for 4 innings and then matching up your best with their best. Like, I think you can look at it from both sides. I personally just think that they're not going to move off of Kodai Senga. I wish this was my live chat poll. I wish I could go back and redo my live chat poll, because I would have asked you all, chat, please, if you're in my chat or if you're in Rob's chat, let us know. Not who do you want? That's not the question.
Right.
We just both answered who we want. Who you want as well, like, feel free to answer. But who do you think objectively, in the mind of Carlos Mendoza and the New York Mets, who do you think they are going to throw in game one? I just cannot see a world where it's not Kodai Senga. But again, Rob, you could be spot on. You've been spot on multiple times here. I could see, and I see the rationale of where you're coming from too, which is why I'm like internalizing that. I'm like, okay, maybe we do see Manaea game one. But for me, all things consistent, I think it's still going to be Senga at the end of the day, because you have that safety blanket. Because not only because, and this is why, right? You not only save Senga for down the road in the series, and you can do the same thing with Manaea, even if he goes in game two. The safety blanket, just like game one in the NLDS, is going to be David Peterson. So he's going to be going regardless in that game, in my opinion, no matter what point it is.
Agree.
It's just a matter if he throws 3 innings out of the pen, 2 innings, or however many innings. But again, you would theoretically save Senga and Peterson, because I think that they're a package duo at this point with the pitch restriction that Senga has for later on in the series. Again, interesting way to think about it. I know that we're kind of doing a little bit of overkill on this, but it's an interesting thought. It really is an interesting thought.
Well, you know what I was thinking too. Maybe the decision hasn't been made yet, because I think it depends on who you face, right? What do the Dodgers have that the Padres don't? A lot of left-handed batters too. So if you got the Dodgers, you might want to go Manaea game one. If you got the Padres, you might go with Senga game one, because of their talented right-handed batters as well. That might be something to look at as well. Chris?
That's a valid point, because like I said, when we were talking about Jeff McNeil and who he's going to be taking, whose roster spot is he going to be taking at the top of this podcast, like, I'm like, well, you have the lefty and Danny Young, you can make that move. But again, like, if you face the Dodgers, they have like half their lineup as lefties, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, anybody outside of the guys that I named is a lefty. And let's take a look here. Muncy, Ohtani, Freeman, that's 3 right there off the bat. I know there has to be one more in that lineup, unless I'm mistaken.
If I'm not mistaken, I checked the lineup the other day, yesterday, actually, whenever they played last. I checked it. I think they had 5 left-handers, if not 6. Yeah. I think that one guy was supposed to start but didn't, and then came in later in the game. So they might have 6 lefties in their lineup. So, and again,
BX is saying Gavin Lux is a lefty too, so that's already 4 right there. And so that also does definitely play a role, and that's why I put my live chat poll as who do you think is going to win today, Dodgers versus Padres. And the overwhelming majority of people right now think the Dodgers are going to win. I'm more so curious about the Dodgers in terms of their rotation. I mean, outside of Yamamoto and Walker Buehler, who did not pitch well, if I'm not mistaken, in his start in this NLDS against the Padres, who else do they have to offer? Like, who else is going to go for them?
And that's the reason why, I know we kind of skipped over, who do you want, but that's why a lot of people want the Dodgers. But again, be careful what you wish for, because you just never know, But well, let me ask you, Chris. Like, we'll kind of connect this with our final thoughts. Who do you want, and who do you think will get? I guess who would win today, but who would you want based on who is left, the Dodgers or the Padres? And of course, your final thoughts.
That's a loaded question. I've made my mind up. I've been kind of flip-flopping back and forth in terms of this actual statement and my actual answer to this. I want the Dodgers. And again, be careful what you wish for, but you're asking me, so I'm gonna say it. I want the Dodgers. I think we're gonna get the Padres. That's what I think. I think the Padres win tonight. I'm not convinced with Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Darvish is established. He's proven. He's the veteran. We saw how good he was against the Mets for these last couple of years, especially in that wild card series. I think that they get the job done in LA today, and I think that really the Dodgers pitching situation catches up with them. And I think they're going to have a short leash on Yoshinobu Yamamoto as well. Again, he's not proven, not nearly as much as you Darvish. Obviously, this is only his first season, and he's kind of had a rocky season. It hasn't really been a dominant season for Yoshinobu Yamamoto. So,
Yeah.
I'd like to see the Dodgers in an ideal scenario. I understand the lineup and who they got in terms of their top four. You know, that's a talented lineup. We're not gonna just overshadow that. But I think with the pitching matchup, and I take a look at where 2022, and again, this team is much better than 2022. I've been on record saying that, but where did the 2022 team go wrong when they met the Padres? It was because their pitching dominated the New York Mets, and different lineup, different hitters for this team for the New York Mets. And they also don't have Joe Musgrove, which is kind of like that's an important pitcher for them to be missing. He's out for the year now. So I don't know how they're going to kind of replace him. It's interesting. I mean, you take a look at it. Obviously, you still have to play the game, but the pitching matchups are kind of like they're in flux for those two teams. So final answer, would like to see the Dodgers if I had a choice. Again, you have one answer or the other, right? You're going to see one of these teams, but I think the Padres win tonight. That's my answer.
Yeah, if I'm using my heart, I want the Padres for payback. If I'm using my head, it's obviously the Dodgers because it's a smarter choice, right? Because of their situation with the pitching. And I don't think their lineup is as deep as the Padres. I think after the fifth batter, it's kind of bad. But again, be careful what you wish for, right? The Dodgers with the same basic team basically swept you at Citi Field, right? So, and I know the season series doesn't matter, but I would want the Dodgers, right? But here's what I want. I want Yamamoto and Darvish to get rocked in the first two innings. I want the Dodgers and the Padres to use a ton of their bullpen, and somebody wins 9-8. And then they're really struggling to figure out what the hell they're going to do over the next two games because they only get 1 day off. So the head wants the Dodgers, the heart wants the Padres. But honestly, guys, the way this Mets team has played, I don't care. I think we got to be more confident in saying I would rather have the Dodgers because of this, and this, and I don't want the Padres because of this, and this, right? This team has played so well. They did beat two division winners already in the National League, right? These are two teams that have one of the best, one of the three best records in baseball and in National League, excuse me. So I don't think we should be afraid anymore of anybody, right? This is not a situation where the Mets, pull the rabbit out of their hat and barely won these series from the skin of their teeth. They played extremely well in this postseason. And I have no indication that it's going to change. That doesn't mean they're not going to lose a 7-game series, but I think we need to be more confident in this team than worry about who we're playing. And I know somebody in the chat, I think it was Oliver, saying that Mendoza says that he doesn't care the opponent about his game 1 starter. He's just being respectful to both teams, because if you play your hand and say you say Stroman game 1, you're clearly looking at the Dodgers. If you put up Senga and he does it early before somebody wins, you're going to be looking more towards the Padres. So he's just being respectful of the two teams. That's why he said it like that. He's not, I don't care how confident you are in your team. You're not going to do that to the other team and play your hand. Nobody's going to pick their starter before a team is decided in the NLCS against the Mets. It's just not a smart move, regardless if you don't care about your opponent or not. But just be confident in this team, regardless of who you face, right? If it's the Padres, the talk's all going to be about 2022, right? That's all it's going to be talked about, right? And that's going to be the storyline. If it's the Dodgers, guess what the Dodgers storyline is with the New York Mets in the playoffs? The Mets have manhandled them in the postseason. So, it's one side of it goes in the Mets' favor when it comes to storylines, and the other goes against us in the storyline. So, it's going to be fascinating nonetheless. It's going to be a redemption or a payback with the Padres, and it's going to be, can we continue to beat the Dodgers in the postseason? every time we faced them since 1988. As obviously we lost to them in the postseason in 1988. So that's how long it's been since the Dodgers have beaten the Mets in the postseason. So, and it goes back, to the early 2000s. So again, be confident regardless of who you face. I'm confident in this team because they prove it to me time and time again with their clutch hitting, their quality starts, and their clutch pitching when they needed it. They got it. And I don't see why you shouldn't be confident regardless of who you face. And with the days off, I'm even more confident because we get to set up our team and give guys that are much needed rest. And I think that is also key to this NLCS with the New York Mets. So Dodgers. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I didn't get my final thoughts. I really want to say this, and I think we've kind of skirted around this. I think that the rest also is going to help one of the most important New York Mets players that they're going to need to show up if they want to get to the promised land, and that's going to be Edwin Diaz. Yep. That's going to be Edwin Diaz. I hope wherever he is right now, he's watching some film, obviously enjoying his time, his off day. Tomorrow, maybe if he picks up a baseball, I don't know what's going to happen, but I don't know what his schedule's like. Figure out the slider. And if you think you have a good grasp on it, okay, go back to attacking them with it. But please just trust your fastball, man. Trust your fastball. Yep. And again, there's no not trusting Edwin Diaz at this point in the season. I understand that he has not looked great. He's looked shaky. He's been escaping. He just escaped this last inning by the skin of his teeth, right? I get all of that. But there is no New York Mets, punching their ticket to the World Series without Edwin Diaz. You simply cannot replace him in those high leverage situations. So don't even try to bring that up in the live chat because I'm going to push back on it. But again, I appreciate you all being here. My final thoughts are change the narrative. You guys, you all know, Rob, everybody in the chat knows what I've been saying. Again, continue to prove the baseball world wrong. I want to see more celebrations. I want to see these guys having more fun. Shout out to Jose Iglesias with the OMG remix Pitbull coming out too. I think it's already released. So I listened in on that. I thoroughly enjoyed that. Listen, this team is having fun and we're having fun with them. I'm sure come Sunday, it's going to be immediate nerves, but we're here for the ride and we'll be with you all for the rest of the way. Pre-game and post-game coverage on Sunday. It's fun. It's a fun time. Enjoy this. Enjoy this. Be present in the moment. That's what I'm doing, and I encourage all Mets fans to do that. So, again, let's get the job done. We'll see who we're playing after tonight, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, whether we do another show tomorrow or whether the next show is going to be the pregame on Sunday. We got you all covered, so make sure you hit the thumbs up. As always, I apologize about the mic issues. Again, as you can tell, I'm not in my usual setup. I'm at some family member's house right now. I want to get this stream in for you all, so I apologize about the technical difficulties, but I'm going to try to also do a Knicks stream here in just about 25 minutes before this NLCS. So if you're a Knicks fan, hop over to the chat over there. We'll talk some New York Knicks basketball. And as always, let's go Mets. Orange and blue, change the narrative.
Absolutely. And I don't know what happened in your final thoughts. Your mic got extremely nice and loud, so you're good for your next pod if you need to. So listen, guys, be confident. Chris says change the narrative. That's exactly what the narrative, what it should be going down the line here. As far as they might go, if it ends in a series, it is what it is. But I don't think they will. To be quite honest with you, I don't care who we play. I think this team is confident. The fans are confident. Will there be rough moments? Will there be scary moments? Absolutely. But enjoy the Pitbull remix with Jose Iglesias. I was blasting that on my drive home from work with a couple of my coworkers. We all just started playing it in the parking lot, just like idiots we are. But guys, get ready. We'll know tonight who we're playing. One more day off before the NLCS in either San Diego or LA. With that said, guys, thank you for tuning in to Mets Talk Live. Hit that like button, guys. Subscribe to both channels. If you're on X, hop over to YouTube for a second and subscribe to both of our channels. Have a good night, guys. Enjoy one more day of an off day for our New York Mets, and let's get ready for some NLCS baseball. Have a great night. Let's go Mets. See you next time.
Rivals smear, but we push on through. Every heartbeat bleeds. full of echo. Concrete jungle, dreams bust to grow. Mets in the air, chase glory, no fear. Broken backs, but hearts steer clear. OMG, the chaos, what a scene. Streets buzzing like a machine. Grimace from the shadows, chills on my spine. Past haunts, the future shine. Comebacks in the night, keep dreams alive. Fighting tooth and nail just to survive. City's heartbeat echoes in our chant. Grit and glory is all we want. Brooklyn to Queens, hear the roar. From laughter to blood in every scar. Living legends made on this ground. From silence we scream, make a sound. Rising high, falling low, repeat again. Cycles of the game, addicted to the pen. Graffiti tales spray on the wall. Met saga, forever stand tall. Rivals smear, but we push on through. Every heartbeat bleeds, orange and blue. Grimace fades, turn into a storm.